So we've come to Waterford city centre. We are going to be talking to a new, emerging and very successful small startup business. A perfect example of how people are going to be preparing for Brexit and dealing specifically with the idea of registrations and certificates.
It's great. We only started really this time last year to put the company together, although I'd probably been working on this idea for about 3 years. So
where did you get the idea from?
Well, I've history, I suppose, in sort of veterinary nutraceuticals. In 2000, I set up a manufacturing company doing supplements for cats and dogs and horses, which I sold in 2009. Got involved more in the pharmaceutical end of a pharmaceutical company, Q1 Scientific, in Westside Business Park, which does stability storage and particular types of testing for pharmaceutical products. But I always had this in the background that there's a shortage of veterinary drugs, believe it or not, for small animals. And I've had a couple of ideas. We should be looking at developing new drugs. This one we're looking at first is for gastric ulcers in dogs, and it kind of went from there. So got the money together and started to build a team this time last year.
Tell us what happens at the minute, Louise, in terms of your supply chain and products and parts being brought in from Britain, for example.
Yeah, well, I suppose we're registering veterinary pharmaceuticals, so our approach would be Europe-wide. So being part of the 27 member states is excellent for us because we can actually register the drug centrally, and so you then have a registration that covers all the countries. So it's a super situation to be in. That, of course, now is what's going to happen when it comes to Brexit. So where are we going to have to go with our regulations? Do we have to apply separately to the UK? Our strategy is keep going as we are, but make sure that we have met all of the European standards, all of those criteria, because I do expect that in some way the UK is going to have to adapt to them and is going to have to accept them if they want a continuous supply of drugs, which is the area that we're in. And really veterinary drugs wouldn't be any different from human drugs in the case of the regulations and how you actually get them on the shelf.
Tell me about registration and certificates, all those things.
Well, I suppose the regulatory process is very prescriptive. You have to go through a specific chain of events. So for us, for registering a drug, we've really got two specific aspects. One, you're trying to show that your product is manufactured to the correct standards. So all of those, ISO, good manufacturing practice, which is called GMP in pharmaceuticals, that would be a worldwide standard. We have to make sure that we manufacture to those standards and convince the authorities that the tablet that you give to your dog is consistent and safe from the day it was made to the end of its shelf life. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is to prove that the product is safe to give to your dog and efficacious. So that requires clinical studies and it requires safety studies actually in dogs, both in healthy dogs and also in dogs that have the specific disease. So that's generally carried out in the field, but the regulations that govern them are completely from the European Medicines Agency, and that's what we have to follow.
What sort of preparation have you had to put in for either a no-deal Brexit or a Brexit which hopefully will have some kind of an agreement?
I suppose we're cognizant of the fact that one of our suppliers that we've been looking to use as a contract manufacturer is based in the UK, and we've been trying to work into our our financial scenario is what would be the implications for pricing. Okay, that's the main consideration would be if we're going to purchase something in sterling, because we're going to be selling in euros or dollars. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at in terms of what will be the regulations. So will that facility still be operating to European Medicines Agency standards at the end? Now, I expect that to be the case.
You'd imagine it would.
Because that's where they're at the moment. So I wouldn't panic about that, but I think we do need to build into our projections if we're going to use European suppliers or if we're going to be selling into the UK, because the price points are going to have to take that currency into account.
Has it been discommoding?
For us, it hasn't, because I think we're in a different place in terms of an early stage development of pharmaceuticals. We're running a concurrent application with the European Medicines Agency and the FDA. So we're taking we've a lot of considerations for looking at this worldwide. So really Brexit is only one part in terms of if we have to look at the UK as a different market, in the same way as we're hoping to register in Canada, we're hoping to register in Australia, New Zealand and other countries as well. So it would be part of our strategy to look at that. However, my disappointment that we can't just factor the 60 million people that are in the UK and their dogs into the equation is, it's not the ideal
rough,
scenario. You could say that. But that's my personal opinion. It's real disappointing.
Have you made any cost analysis on the different scenarios?
Yeah, we have, but again, and I've had other companies that's traded in with the UK where I sold products to the UK, and even then, because the UK never got involved, always had sterling. You always had those currency fluctuations. Now, and that's uncontrollable when you go to price something, whether it's to buy it or whether it's to sell it in. So we have scenario planning if we use that manufacturer as to what can happen with the sterling. I think from the standards, as I said, the standards point will be okay. So we have certainly considered that. And I think really it will possibly push us towards using European manufacturers more than manufacturers in the UK. And I think that it's more that you know what's going to happen, as opposed to any kind of uncertainties in the business are very difficult to deal with.